more about the pl-sql procedures, how to drop the indexes and how to recreate the indexes, and what are the how to exchange the data between the partitions and all, how to analyze the tables. So basically, we need to understand the Oracle PL/SQL to get started with the stored procedure transformation. Since because we are working with Oracle database here, so we need to understand the PL/SQL part of it as well. So as part of the syllabus, so what we do is I'll actually give you the high level overview of what is a PL/SQL and how do you write the programs, and as an Informatica developer, what do you need to know in terms of a PL/SQL. All those things we'll understand. See, it's a very simple language if you understand the SQL. I mean, if you are not familiar with, I mean, if you're not good with SQL, then it would be little difficult to understand this. See, when you talk about the PL/SQL, so you can call it as a PL/SQL as a procedural logic structured query language. It is just an extension to your uh, SQL. Okay, so procedural logic structured control language. So when it comes to the programming languages, so every vendor has defined their own programming language. So the PL/SQL is something that which works only with Oracle database. So you must understand this. I mean, PL/SQL, I cannot write the PL/SQL code in the SQL Server database or a DB2 database. That will not work. It works only with the Oracle. So for SQL Server, they have their own programming language. For understanding that, that's nothing but your TSQL. And I think for a DB2 as well, you have a similar type of a language that is also called as a TSQL. So basically, the same PL/SQL will not work for a other type of programming, I mean other type of databases. So it is, and you can call it as an Oracle proprietary language which works only with Oracle database. All right, so now in the PL/SQL we generally embed the SQL statements only, like your DML statements, DDL statements. At the same time, we'll also write about the queries, cursors and all those things. So basically, the PL/SQL language will is comprises of three types. I mean, three program units you can write, or three program blocks which you can write. So one is called as an anonymous block. Anonymous block means which does not have any name. That is called as anonymous block. When you are defining a program, you're not giving any name to that. That's called as anonymous block. And the other type of program that you actually write, that is called as a procedure, and the next one is called as a function. So anonymous block, procedure and the function. So we need to also understand about the other type of objects in the PL/SQL, that is called as a packages. And we'll also talk about the dynamic SQL, so how to use a dynamic SQL. So I won't go in much details about all these concepts, because if you understand the basic level, you can slowly explore it and what is required for an Informatica development. Okay, so how we are going to start with it? So anonymous block in the sense which does not have any name. So whenever yeah, so let's talk about how the anonymous block works, or what is a general PL/SQL program unit will be. So general PL/SQL program unit, we are talking about anonymous block. So you'll have a declaration section, and you'll have a begin and then the end. And here you can also add an exception section to this. This is a program syntax for any PL/SQL program. Here you will declare all the variables which are required. I mean, all the variables which you want. And at the same time, when you say a begin, you'll all write executable statements here. Executable statements. And this is like a mandatory block. You must write an execution block. Mandatory in the sense, without this, you cannot define a program. It's a mandatory block. and declaration of the variables is like a optional block. So it's an optional one. So it's like either if you want to declare a variables, you can declare it or you can do that. So whenever you want to capture the errors, this is called as an exception section. Undefined errors. So undefined errors can be captured here. This is also an optional block. Without without the exception block, I can still write a program. So end is a end of your pl-sql program. So this is a syntax which you define generally for anonymous blocks or whatever. So let's try to identify how we can write a program and all. So just like, so before stepping into the sample execution, so you need to also understand about the internal API which is provided by the Oracle database called as a Dbms output. So Dbms output is like you can call it as an internal API for printing any messages on the console. So you can call it as it's an internal API or application interface which helps you to print the messages on the console. So it is in the simple statements, Dbms output is like just like your printf statement in your C language or whatever you write it whenever you want to write. So printf, scanf statements, like whenever you want to read something or whenever you want to write something. So print the messages on console. So this is actually used. So this is called as a Dbms output. It has some methods, just like your Java language, if you are familiar with. It is actually having a methods, or you can call it as a procedures. So one is called as a put line. Put line is a method. It prints or it writes the data to the buffer, or it writes the messages to the buffer, or prints the messages. So this one you need to know. I mean, this is enough. Put line. So there are different other methods as well in the Dbms output, but you can just understand what is a put line. What does it do? It will work. So this is a sample pl-sql block program. So let's try to write the let's try to write some sample program. I just want to print a message saying that I'm learning pl-sql and as part of Informatica course. So that's what I want to print a message on the console. So let's try to write the message now. So let's say, as I said, declaration and the exception section is not a mandatory block to define a program. So I can just define a program within a begin and end. Begin and end is a mandatory block. Without this, you cannot write a program. Okay. So begin and end, you have to write it. So I just want to print it. Let's say a message called as Dbms output dot put underscore line. Let's say this one, I just want to print a message saying that I'm learning pl-sql. Let's say this is what is a message which I want to print. As you know, whenever you want to print a string, that must be a part of a single quotes, right? So that should be a single quotes, just like your SQL. That must be in the same way. So now I want to execute this. So how will you execute a program, or if you want to print any other line? So I just want to print, this spelling is wrong, Dbms output, and I also want to print a message saying that Dbms output dot put underscore line. Let's say I want to write another message as this is my first pl-sql program, or this is my first anonymous block, which it is there. So now how to execute it? See, when I say anonymous block is something that which will not be stored or which does not have any name. So this program has any name to it? Did I name the program with whenever you are creating a program, you create saying that add two numbers, subtract two numbers, divide two numbers, like this. So you will give some name to the program so that you can actually identify them or you can actually call them. But here I'm not giving anything, so that means it's an anonymous block. Now I want to check whether this program is working fine or not. First of all, you need to actually turn on the dbms output. Unless that dbms output is turned on, you'll not be able to see the message. See, what I went here is I went to view and then fetch the dbms output. Hope everybody has a similar version of SQL Developer. So to turn on the dbms output, either you can use a control N or you can just click on that plus. So now here this, see my output, whatever it is there, it will be printed here as part of this. So now let's try to print it. So this anonymous block is executed and I'm able to see the output. That's, I'm learning pl-sql and this is my first pl-sql program. So this is how the dbms statement can be used for learning the, I mean for printing this one. So this is your a small anonymous block program. This is, you can call it as a program one. So I'll be going on with multiple things, so you need to practice them one by one. So this is a sample program how we need to write. So let's try to write a simple statement. I mean now my question is like, I want to print or I want to add two numbers and then print the result of the two numbers. Okay, so how do you do that? So basically here we are going to learn how to declare the variables. So for declaring the variables, you need to use a keyword called as a declare and then the begin, and then you're going to use end. See, basically here for declaring the variables, uh, in other programming languages, if you see, right, so in the C language and all, whenever you want to declare the variables, we'll give it as int a comma b comma c. That means you're defining three variables of the similar data type, right? But here in pl-sql you cannot define a multiple variables at a time. It is not possible. You have to define one by one. So suppose, let's say there are a similar type of data types, you know that, right? In SQL you have varchar, character, number, integer, pls integer, all those things, similar data types. You can use it. Let's say I want to define a as a number, and so whenever, this is very important statement that you have to remember is every statement in a pl-sql will be enclosed by the semicolon. So if you're not writing the semicolon here, see here I have actually written a semicolon. So that means that is the end of that line. Your pl-sql compiler treats that as, okay, this line is end and I have to go for a new line. So that is the, you can call it as a notation where your pl-sql compiler understands that that is the end of the line. All right. So you need to always enclose. See here, a number, and you have a b, and this is also a number data type. I can also define it as number of 5 or something, or you can just leave it as number, anything is fine. And this statement is there, and I need three variables. Why? Because I have to add the data and then print the message as part of it. So let's see, and then the number of 10, let's say this is what is my this one. So this is how we define it, and you need to understand the this one. Let's say if you want to add it, just like your SQL, you can write this option. So arithmetic operators, you can use it directly. C equal to this, equal to operator here in pl-sql is called as an assignment operator. So colon equal to is an assignment operator which you have to. So whenever you want to initialize any value to a other thing, so you'll always define that as this. So let's say I want to initialize the value for a also. Let's say I'm giving the value as 10,000 for a. For b, I'm giving it as a 12,000. So this is an assignment operator. Colon equal to is an assignment operator. So for this, I'm giving as a 12,000. So now I want to print a message, the result of a plus b. So that is nothing but if you want to print it. So dbms output dot put underscore line, put underscore line, let's say the result of a plus b. Result of a and b is, so I can just write something like this. So you know the concatenation operator, whenever you want to concatenate something, use the concatenation operator and then print the C. So enclose that. So basically when you execute it, if there is a syntax error, it will throw at the runtime. So you need to get familiar with the errors, what kind of errors that you get in the pl-sql. So there was no syntax error. Basically it has completed the anonymous block and it has print the result as 22,000. So 10,000 plus 12,000, that is your 22,000. So if there is a syntax error, let's say you do not have a semicolon here. So when you try and execute, what kind of error it will throw? See here, it is saying that colon equal to it's not null default characters, compilation error. Encountered a begin when expecting the following. So that is what is error. So you need to get familiar with all these kind of compilation errors and the runtime errors to resolve the pl-sql. So the semicolon is missing. That was an error. So I'm just um, adding back to it. So what is the use of concatenation operator here? Why should I use it? See, basically, your result, you're actually concatenating the result of value C to this one. So if you do not have this value, it will just print C. But I'll not understand that whether it is printing a value for C or something. So that is the reason. To make the message as more meaningful, I'm actually using a concatenation here. So this is how it works. So if you don't provide the default value for a number, what is the default value? Based on the value that you initialize, it will allocate that many number of bytes in a pl-sql buffer. Okay. So if you're assigning 5 digits value, it will allocate the 5 bytes of memory. If you're allocating some 10 digit value, it will allocate 10 digits of memory. So when you say number of 5, it's a fixed length. It will never vary. So it will allocate always 5 only. So this is how you can define the sample pl-sql block. So likewise, you can use all the arithmetic operators, just like the way how I have used um, your this thing plus b. So you can still use this arithmetic operators in the same way. So let's take some more examples and then work with it. So for you, in order to start working on the pl-sql fundamentals, I think I already shared this document. In case if you don't receive it to work on more fundamental things, you can ask admin team to send this, Gangadhar. So Oracle 11g pl-sql fundamental. So it has all the things. So I'm not going in details about each and everything. So basically, we understand about how many types of variables are there basically. Um, so this is how you declare the variable, and this is an initialization operator. And if you define that as a not null, that means you cannot initialize the null value to that. In your program, when you are doing it, you cannot initialize the null value to that. So that's how you can declare the variables. So let's try to print one more program. Let's say I want to define a name, but I want to reinitialize that value within this. So how this program works? See, what is the default value if you're not initializing the variable? So that's going to be null. So it basically prints null and then it will override this value. So it will override it as a jan. So let's try to print that. Let's first understand how many types of variables that you have in the pl-sql. So on a high level, you can call it as there are two types of variables. One is scalar variables, another is a composite variable. Scalar variable means scalar data types, or which means it will have only one value it will store. Like it's based on the data type. You divide them. So one is called as a scalar data types, and another is called as a composite data types. Composite data types which you have. Scalar data types are your number, varchar. All these are all like scalar data types. Varchar. Uh, Varchar, date, boolean. So these are all the Scalar data types. So this is a scalar variable. So if you say a number of equal to 10,000, that's a scalar variable. How many values you can store in a? Only one at a time. You cannot store multiple values in a, like your array. You know array, right? In the C language, how the arrays works. So in an array, you can actually store a multiple values. Even though it's a variable, you can store a multiple. So scalar means which will store only the single value. Composite data types is nothing but your collections. So in the simple terms, in other languages, whatever you call it as an array, one variable, you are using that to store the multiple values. So that's called as a composite data types. And there is another one, other type of variables called as a LOBs, large objects. Large objects, which are basically you have data types like CLOB, CLOB, and BLOB, binary large object, and then the B file. These are all the different large objects. So in the collections, you definitely come across the record types. So we are not going to discuss about all these because you don't need them basically for nested tables and arrays. So this is what we are going to will have this thing. So scalar data types, composite data types, and the large objects. So these are all the different types of variables what you have. So if you want to store the bigger values, then we'll go for this one. Yeah. And when you are declaring the variable, something you need to remember is that you cannot declare a variable same as your column name. Suppose I have an employee ID as a column and you are also defining the same variable. So definitely that's a kind of an ambiguous, right? See here in this example, you have employee ID and you also have an employee ID which you define. So this way it will not work. And the way how you define the uh, what do you call how you define the tables and the table names. Generally the table name cannot be more than 30 characters, and table name cannot start with a number, and table name cannot contain the special characters like exclamation and all. So all these holds good even for your pl-sql objects. Whenever you are creating a pl-sql object, your pl-sql object cannot be more than 30 characters, and it cannot start with a number, and it cannot you cannot have the characters other than dollar hash, so which is not allowed. So it's still the same thing which you have. So writing the executable statements, so we probably need to understand the arithmetic operators. And one more thing in the pl-sql block is that whenever you want to comment a line in the pl-sql, we'll use hyphen hyphen. See, hyphen hyphen is the to comment the one line. To comment a single line, we'll use hyphen hyphen. And for commenting the multiple lines, suppose let's say I have a program like this, and see basically I have multiple statements like this, and I just want to comment all of them. So if I use here hyphen hyphen, it's just a comment, means that is not part of your program. I mean, your compiler will not consider that as an executable statement. So suppose if you want to comment a multiple lines, so this is what it is. So if you want to do this, this is called as a single line comment, and this is called as a multi-line comment. So whenever you use it, multi-line comment. So let's try to pull this. Yeah, what is your issue, Miss Shailesh? Yeah, probably. See, if you're already familiar with PLSQL or something, you can probably drop off for now. And when we start with actual PLSQL programs, right? So how to restore and all. So that time you can probably join back. That's fine. You can drop off now. No issues, Shailesh. Okay, so that's fine. When you talk about the single line comment and the multi-line comment, so this is what it is, and you can start using that. All right. So let's try to go ahead directly with the control structures, like how to use a if statement, how to use a if then else statement, and how to use a for loop, case statement and all. So we'll first discuss about this, and then we'll move on with the cursors. See, basically, this thing is important. Like, you need to understand the syntax, how to use a control structures. So if you understand how to use a control structures, you can definitely write a bigger programs as well. So let's try to see that how the if statement works. Let's try to write a simple program and then do it. So let's say I'm this is a example for a simple if statement. So when you go for a this one variable port, and you're defining that as a number, and you just want to check whether that variable is less than 11 or not. So let's try to print this. So I'm actually checking the age. If the age is less than 11, we are actually printing a message as a child. Let's try to do that. So declare. So and then you call it as a begin and then end. So let's try to print this, and you call it as, let's say I have a variable port, so which I call it as my age, and then let's say this is a number data type, and this is equal to 11. So let's say I'm defining the age as 30 or something, or 60. I'm defining the age as 60, and I'm actually checking if the age is less than 11, so we have to print a message as child. So how it is going to work? So let's say if you have this one v underscore, let's say my age is less than or equal to 11, then so this is a syntax, and then end if. So this is a end of if statement where you have to write. So I'm just going to print this one, let's say dbms output dot put underscore line, and let's say, so I'm a child or something, so something like this. I have to print a message. See here, why I've actually written this simple program is that you need to understand if this condition is evaluated to true, what happens if this condition is evaluated to false, and what happens if this condition is evaluated to null. So then you can determine this. So let's say when you try to execute, basically 60 is less than or equal to 11, which is equal to false. It should not print anything. Now it will not print anything when you execute this program. So this anonymous block is completed, but this if statement is not executed. I mean, this is not evaluated to true. Let's say I'm passing this as 10. So when you try to execute, let's say this is actually printing me the message what it is there. So whenever you define any condition in the if block will get executed only when if this condition is evaluated to true. If it is evaluated to false, or if it is evaluated to null, then it will not get executed. So what happens if I actually initialize this with the null value? Will it print this message? No, it will not print this message. So when you try to use it, it will not print because this condition is not evaluated to true. Remember, whenever the condition is evaluated to true, then only it will execute that executable statement. If else, it will not do that. So that is what is it is like a example for a simple if statement. So you have again another one called as a if then else statement. So it's like just the same program, you have a else block. So what happens if you are passing this, and if this condition is not evaluated to true, it will just execute your else block. Let's say you want to print the same message, something like I'm not a child. So just definitely you can still write. So when you try and execute, this is still printing because it is 11 is less than this. So what happens if I pass a null value here? Do you think that it will execute this? It will print this? Yes. So it will just print. Why it is printing as I'm not a child, even though you're passing a null value, because this condition is evaluated to null. What happens null less than or equal to 11? What will be the output when you compare null less than or equal to 11? It's going to be null. Yes. See, whatever the comparison that you do except the concatenation with the null value, always it's a null. So if you see that null less than or equal to 11, it's evaluated to null. So that's why it is printing the else block, not the true block. So that's how you can do the if then else statement. So we'll see the last one in the if then else if family. It's like whenever you want to check for a multiple conditions, then we'll go for uh, v underscore my age. So whatever that you have, and it'll just print a message. Suppose let's say if you want to print a multiple messages by comparing the multiple conditions, so it's like a else if ladder. You can call it as a simple if. This is if then else, and there is another one called as a else if ladder. So how can I check the multiple things? So how do you check it? So let's say this is a same program. Till this I'm going to consider it as is. So let's say if the v age is less than or equal to, then we are going to print the message as I'm a child. If you want to check a multiple conditions, let's say else if. See, one thing you have to remember is else if you don't have e here, it is not like this. That is a wrong statement. So this is like a else if. Let's say if my age is less than 20, let's say if you want to print that message, so which you can call it as a, let's say something like this message, and likewise you can print n number if you can have n number of else if blocks. So if any above of them, yes, any above of them is not true, then it will print the default block. I mean, it will go and execute the default statement. It's something like, so this is what it is. So you can write n number of the statements. So end if. So always whenever you close the if statement, it should be always end if. So let's say if I'm passing the message as 60, when you try to execute 60 is less than or equal to 11, this is false. 60 is less than or equal less than 20, this is also false. So it will go and execute your else block. So that's how you can use a if else condition, else if ladder. So you can have a n number. So is this a else block is a mandatory when you're writing? May not be. I mean, you can even cannot have the else block. I can take out this and then run. So let's try to check what happens if I run this without a else block. So it's still a valid one. What is throwing an error? Okay, let's try to check. Error in line 68. Why did it work? Okay. It still works. You don't need to pass the else block when you're using. It's not a kind of a mandatory you can call. So you can just define multiple conditions and then you can take out. Yeah, very important question here, that is pl-sql is a case sensitive language. Is pl-sql is a case sensitive language? No. So just like your SQL, pl-sql is not a case sensitive. You can write in any case. You can write in uppercase, you can write in the lowercase. pl-sql is not a case sensitive language. So this is what it is, and which you can write in uppercase or a lowercase or whatever. So that's how you can write the if statements. I'm not going in deep about it, about the other type of expressions or whatever you call. So handling the null values, that's what you have to understand. So how it will work. So whenever you want to compare the multiple conditions also, you're going to do that. So this is like a control structures. Whenever you want to compare any kind of a conditions, like a if then else condition, you can define that. What about the next one? It's like loops. Like whenever you want to execute the similar type of a statement for a multiple times. So how many loops you have? There are three loops in this. One is called as a basic loop and another is called as a for loop, and the next one is called as a do while. Sorry, while loop that we have. So these are the three things. So let's take one example for each of them and then understand what is a why do we need to use a loop and why do we need to use a for loop and all. Most of the cases will go for a for loop, but let's understand what is a use with the basic loop, for loop, and then the while loop what we have. So in case of a basic loop, it's basically that you need to write your own counter to exit out of the loop. So basically, let's say I want to print what is this here? Let's try to take up a different example. I don't think we have a better one here. So let's try to insert the data into your location table. So you're basically fetching the location ID and then the new city, you're inserting it thrice. Okay, so let's try to build a simple example. Maybe we'll take a cursor and then do it. So cursor is like let me just introduce you the cursor. Cursors are actually of two types. One is called as a implicit cursor and another is called as a explicit cursor. So you can say the cursor as a memory pointer in your pl-sql So whenever you want to loop through the multiple records, so it's like a memory pointer which is associated with the SQL query. It's a memory pointer associated with the SQL query. So there are two types of cursors associated with SQL query. So there are two types of cursors in pl-sql. One is called as a implicit cursors and another is called as a explicit cursors. So implicit cursors are like all the DML statements are your implicit cursors, in the sense whenever you write a insert statement, update statement, delete statement and all. So these are all the implicit cursors. And similarly, whenever you write a select into clause, select into also is like an implicit cursor. Explicit cursors means which are defined by the programmer, which are defined by the user, that is called as an explicit cursor. All right. So in this program, if you see this, it's basically they have written a program called as a select into. So this is nothing but an implicit cursor. Select, they're selecting a value and then they're actually uh, printing it. So that's what is happening. So this select into clause, whatever we have written to fetch the value, that is called as a implicit cursor. So let's try to print the numbers from 1 to 10 using the basic loop, how it works. So I just want to print the otherwise I'll just want to print the first three last name of employees. So I just want to print the first three, or no, that doesn't work. We need to go for an explicit cursor for it. So let's try to print the just the values from 1 to 10. So how do you do that? Let's say I define a variable called as a counter. So this I'll just define that as a 1. I'm actually initializing that to 1. I just want to print the numbers from 1 to 10. So how do you write it? Begin and then the end. So you basically try to use the loop and then you try to use it as a end loop what it is there. So this is a syntax for a basic loop. So you need to loop is a starting point of the keyword and end loop is a end of the keyword what you have. So basically you just want to print a value. So I just want to print a variable as dbms output dot put underscore line, put underscore line. Let's say the value is so it's like, let's say I'm printing the v counter. So this is what it is. And now let's say I want to see, in case of a basic loop you have to increment the counter and at the same time you have to write the condition to come out of the loop, otherwise it will get executed for infinity times, it will just keep on continuing within the memory. So how to increment the counter? So basically I'm just incrementing it, I'm initializing the same port by using v counter plus 1, and I'm using this statement. See, you must include the exit statement in a basic loop, otherwise it will not come out of the loop. So let's say I want this to come out whenever a v counter is greater than 10. If it is greater than 10, I want this to come out of this, otherwise it will just continue within the same loop. So this is what is a basic loop, and I want to print the numbers from 1 to 10. First it will print 1 and then increment it by increment to 2 and then check 2 greater than 10. No, it will just keep on executing for this. So it will just print me the values from 1 to 10. So how would I execute this? You need to write this exit statement and you need to also write the condition to increment the counter, increment the counter. So let's try to run this. So when you try to see, so it's basically prints the message as value is 1 2 3 4 5 and then till 10. So that's a basic loop. So when you want to print and then this one, so what is the disadvantage here? You have to increment it and you have to use an exit statement in case of a basic loop. So next one is about the while loop. So how do you use a while loop? In case of a while loop, you'll not check the condition. I mean, we'll verify the condition and then go with it. So let's say this is for an example for a basic loop. Let's say, let's try to write the same program for a while loop as well. So how do you define that for a while loop? So in case of a while loop, first we'll check the condition and then get into the loop. So that's how it works. Let's say if I want to print a similar thing here, so begin, let's say here we'll write the condition first, while let's say the v counter is greater than, or you can define that as less than or equal to 10. So while counter is less than or equal to 10, then only you go ahead with it. So loop and then the end loop. So what here you're doing, no, it will not print for 11 also, because you're already checking the condition as less than or equal to 10. It will not basically enter into your loop. Let's check that. Okay. So now you need to just print the message and at the same time you need to define the increment the counter. See, here I have to increment the counter. Advantage with the while loop, so end loop, so which it is. So advantage with the loop and then the while loop is that you can always increment it by some 5 also. It's basically you can increment by your own interval. So basically you can define that by your own interval. Let's say I want to define till 100. So when you try to execute this, so it will just print the messages as 1 6 11, because it is incrementing by 5, so it has printed all the values. So what is here, what you don't need to actually include the condition exit when statement. It will basically check the condition and then go with it. See, in the previous case, does it prints the 11 also? No, it will not print the 11. See, till I have, it has printed till 10 only. So basically it is incrementing the counter and you're immediately you're checking it. So it will not print 11 in the previous case as well. So basically this is what is about the while loop. So you need to define a condition to enter to the loop is at the outside. So that's how you need to define the while loop, how to use it. And the another one is about the for loop. For loop, so which you can define that as it is a pretty simple thing. For this, you don't need to define a separate counter variable, and you can just go over that. So let's say I can directly write a begin and then the end. So I don't need to define any counter variable as well. So I can write for v underscore counter in, let's say if I write 1 to 10. So it will keep on it will go from 1 to 10 and loop and then the end loop. So disadvantage with the for loop is that advantage is like you don't need to increment it. It will automatically increment on its own. You don't need to increment it. So it will always increment by 1. That is a disadvantage. So in case if I want to increment my counter by a different interval, I cannot use the for loop. It will always increment by 1 only. For every time it will increment by 1. So I don't need a variable here for declaring this. I can directly use this value. So when you try to execute, so it's basically printed the message again from 1 to 10. So you can write it as, let's say, whether it is coming from the for loop or not, to just to understand. If you execute this, so this will print the message. See, basically I have not defined any counter and I have not defined any condition to come out of the loop. It is automatically incrementing on its own and then doing it. Now the question is, if I want to print the numbers from 10 to 1, if I want to print the numbers in a reverse way, how would I use it? Can I use the condition as 10 to 1? Will it work? So now basically we are printing the numbers from 1 to 10. I want to print the numbers from 10 to 1. So how would you write it? So basically if you want to use it, yes, you can do that, but you need to use a keyword for it. If you want to execute the counter in a reverse way, in reverse, so you have to use this keyword. It's after that or before, yes. So if you use a reverse keyword, it basically executes from the maximum value to the minimum value. So that's how it works. So if you want to print the messages in the reverse order, so that's how it will get executed. So this is more about the for loop and how you execute it. So we also need to understand about the nested loops. Nested loops means loop inside a loop is called as a nested loop. Suppose if I want to print um, tables, like maybe fifth um, tables I want to print from 1 to 10, one. So how would you use it? Let's say nested table, you can use it. So I'm not defining any variable directly. I'll print the result. Maybe probably we'll just declare one variable called as my result. So this is going to be the number and you just call this one. So let's say if I write something is basically for, I want to print the tables from 1 to 5. So basically, so if I write I in 1 to 5, so this is an outer loop. This is like your outer loop and loop. So basically again you have for j in, let's say 1 to 10. I want to execute this for this one. So this is for inner loop. So I want to print the message, basically the end loop, and this is a closer of your inner loop and this is a closer of your outer loop. So this is what is your program. So let me just, okay, this is your program and you have used it. So let's say I will print the message, let's say my result. So whatever the variable port that you have used, I'm using this one. So let's say my result is equal to I into j. So I star j. So you know that uh, So basically this is a outer loop, and then I'm actually multiplying I and j. So and then I want to print a result. So basically dbms output dot put underscore line. So let's say I want to print the message as the result is, or you just want to print the truth table, right? So let's say not truth table, it's the multiplication table. So I use it as I, and you need to use a star in between. So let's say x and j, and you need to print a result for this. So I would like to have a equal to symbol, and then I would like to use it as a my result. So it prints the message like so. Here before starting of any table, so I want to print another message saying that table for I. So it's basically you can write the printing the table for. So I just want to print for I. So what will happen is I. So first it will print for 1. So basically your outer loop will get executed for 5 times and your inner loop will get executed for 10 times. So when you say that this one I in 1 to 5, so first it will print the printing the table for 1, and then 1 into 1 it will print the result, and 1 into 2, 1 into 3 likewise it will first print for the table for a digit 1, and then it will go for 2, 3 likewise. Your outer loop will get executed for 5 times and your inner loop will get executed for 10 times for every iteration of your outer loop. So basically that many number of times it will get executed. So this is called as a nested loop. How you go about it, so let's try to print it so you'll understand that. Basically when you try to, oops, yes, there is an error. So what is the error here? So here the semicolon is actually missing. So when you try to execute this, now it is printing. See, basically if you go about and then check the output, so it is printing the table for 1 and it has started printing 1 into 1 equal to 1, 1 into 2 equal to 2, and then 1 into 10 is equal to 10. This is for a first iteration, and this is for a second iteration from your outer table. This is for a second iteration, and then it is for a third iteration and for a fourth. So we have given it as 5, so it has printed for a 5 tables. I mean basically for 1 to 5 it has printed the tables in the range of 1 to 10. So this is how you define a nested loops. Nested loops in the sense, for every outer loop your inner loop will get executed for this many iterations. So that is called as a nested loop. Here the counter is I and here the counter is j. So I, j are the two counter variables which I have used, and then I have print a message as I into j is equal to my result. So this is also is useful, and whenever you want to use a nested loops, we'll always go by this example. So that's pretty much on your control structures, how you use them. So if then else statement, how to use, and for loops and everything that we use it. So this is pretty much we have, and I'm not going in with continuous statement and all this. Anyway, we don't use them much of it. You can probably that is about the control structures. We're not going ahead with the composite data types. Tomorrow probably we'll talk about explicit cursors, how to define them, and how to handle the exceptions and the procedures. We'll directly jump on to, once you understand the cursors and exceptions, then you understand at least the 30% of pl-sql programming, how it is to be done. So in order to make yourself comfortable with these examples, probably you can practice this, and at the same time you also have so many other examples which at the end of each chapter. Do we have that? No, it is not there. So basically for practices, you can go to the last. There is something called as a practice and solutions. Okay, so you can go about understanding by each and every chapter. So you can start from the second chapter and then start working on these things. So you have n number of examples here in the same document. In case if you didn't receive the document, so you can probably, so how to write the executable statements, and their solutions also is being written. So you can go ahead with all these practices what it is there. And if you're already comfortable with the pl-sql, probably you know no need to log in for next two classes as well. So we probably discuss more on the pl-sql itself in the next two classes. If you're not if you're already comfortable with the pl-sql, need not to log in for it. All right. So that's pretty much I have. I don't want to continue for longer time, and so that you'll get bored about it. So probably we'll stop it for today. And in case if you have any questions on that, what we have discussed, you can stay back, else you can drop off. Thanks. All right. So if you're good with the assignments, also what we have